Israel Gutierrez joins us here on Big Board Sports. Israel, Roger Weiland, and Zach By on ESPN Radio in Albany. Good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you guys today?
Good. Thanks for a few minutes. Appreciate it. What'd you make of this opening night? It used to be today was the big day, media day, 11 o'clock in the morning, and now they've moved it to this big extravaganza on ESPN, 8 o'clock at night. What'd you make of that whole fireworks last night?
Yeah, that changes everything, right? When you turn it from Tuesday afternoon to Monday night.
Yeah, pretty much.
The whole media day, the whole Super Bowl week fiasco is always humorous to me. I was actually doing my radio show, Izzy in Spain, as you mentioned, during most of this stuff last night, and so it was on mute. And then during a commercial break, I unmuted it for a quick second, and it was Julian Edelman talking. And the first thing I heard from the Super Bowl experience was, yeah, you got to use a lot of beard oil in it to keep it consistent. And I'm just like, okay, turn that back off. And I muted it right away and never watched another second of it. So,
that's it.
The best thing I thought that came out of it was Tom Brady. Well, this wasn't even then. This was the pep rally that they had, was Tom Brady basically yelling, "Let's go," and his annoying voice, and then still talking about, playing until he's 45 or whatever. That's the intriguing part to me, is this guy really can maintain his body and play for that long. Will the Patriots sort of match that timeline with him and stick with him? Because I can't imagine, him leaving Belichick and still playing.
Yeah, I mean, Brady, you're right. The pep rally Brady was good there, and we got a little bit of emotional last night when a young boy asked him, who his hero was, and he said it was his dad, and the radio doesn't do it as much justice as to see him on TV. You can see him, getting a little choked up. Other than that, boy, if I don't hear any more from Bill Belichick, Israel, leading up to kickoff, I won't be disappointed.
Well, he's just got nothing to offer, and he's got no enthusiasm to it. So, and in fact, it's kind of genius on his part. Like, I remember Dan Marino used to admit that he would give boring answers just so people wouldn't come back and ask him more questions. And so it doesn't really work for Bill that way, because they're going to ask him anyway. But yeah, he's got his act down pretty well.
All right, we're still a few days away, but what are your early thoughts on this matchup? We know how good offensively Atlanta has been all year, and I'm pretty sure Matt Ryan, barring the unforeseen, is going to be the MVP of the league, and we know what the stats are defensively for this New England Patriots team. What gives here on Sunday?
I don't know if anything does, to be honest, because I think it's going to be a high-scoring, close game, and I think both these teams can play to their strengths, even against their respective defenses. I know the Patriots defense statistics say what they say, but if you look at their schedule, you look at a lot of the good fortune they had and who they played, and injury-wise, it's hard to really call them, the best defense or even close to the top necessarily. But they can't figure out a way to maybe slow down this Falcons team. But I just feel like this is a team that's in rhythm, not just from this year. I'm talking about over 2 years of building this with the Falcons, and I think they're going to be able to put points in boards. I still think, unless Vic Beasley and that defensive line kind of really finds a way to get to Tom, unique way. I can't imagine that Patriots team isn't ready for everything the Falcons can throw at them, and they can still march it down the field. And so, I'm thinking of a game in the high 30s for each team, and when you don't have the classic sort of storyline matchup like it would have been with maybe Rodgers versus Brady or the Cowboys versus the Patriots, you'll just take a really fun game to watch, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for. So I don't know if I'm predicting it as much as I'm just hoping for it.
Israel, yesterday came out that retired NBA All-Star Steven Jackson said on a podcast that he used to get high before games, and not just a little high, really high, like shooting the basketball over the backboard.
Not just a little high, but like having conversations with myself high.
Yeah, like that high grade. And he also tells a story about Don Nelson and Don Nelson, who's just an NBA legend, and Baron Davis, all celebrating the last drug test of the year. Does this fascinate you like it fascinates me?
I couldn't stop laughing when I read that last night. Steven Jackson is a guy I've worked with before on ESPN, and he definitely keeps it real. He does not hold back. And, yeah, like you hear those stories. I've heard stories. I know, as much as you can say for a fact based on first or second-hand information, but I've known players in the past, retired players, that have smoked before games, and even right outside a locker room before games. So it's not like it's something that's so taboo that you look at it and say, how's that possible? But to just not only to have to embrace it the way they did and to have Don Nelson partaking, if you will. I mean, man, that's maybe there's a reason those teams, Don Nelson's teams, are always so much fun to watch because he let them do whatever they wanted, and he you know, joined in the fun. So I'm sure the league is not happy about this at all, and I'm sure Don Nelson would have, you know, preferred if Steven just would have kept that one to himself. But man, it was funny.
Hey, staying on the NBA beat, we're talking with our good friend Israel Gutierrez from ESPN here this morning on Big Board Sports in Albany. What'd you make? And it's something that's trending big time this morning, and certainly on Mike and Mike. What about the comments of LeBron James directed at Charles Barkley?
You know, I love hearing them just because anytime you get that type of honesty from a player, anytime you get that type of reaction where it's just you can tell he means every single word, sort of visceral. I love that, but I think he's giving Charles too much credit for what Charles' influence is. I don't think Charles is affecting his legacy whatsoever. Just like I didn't think Skip Bayless for years and years has affected his legacy whatsoever. I just think it affects LeBron personally more because Charles is an ex-player and an ex-great, and maybe other players in the league listen to him. But really, Charles is kind of the everyman commentator. Everything that Charles has said is what people on Twitter have said, and people, you know, just walking around that you just talk to, friends, they'll all say the same thing if they have that view of LeBron. And, you know, I'd say it's probably 70-30 in terms of people across the country who think LeBron is whiny and think that this and that, and there's 30% that say, hey, like, if I had that type of power, I'd exercise it as much as possible as well. And there's nothing wrong with what he's doing. He's making the league better. And so while I am up at 30%, and I think that LeBron is doing all the right, not all of the right things, but a lot of the right things, maybe his delivery isn't great, but, you know, there's a lot worse things you can be than whiny, right? So I think Charles, again, LeBron gives Charles too much credit for shaping legacy whatsoever, and I think Charles is kind of, you know, for lack of a better term, he's just kind of simple with a lot of his arguments in a lot of these cases because it's just kind of that natural, that first instinctive thought without actually realizing the good and how much it outweighs sort of those few negatives that you hear about LeBron.
Yeah, see, I think Barkley says a lot of things over the years that are just way, way off the mark. Probably more college basketball related than anything else, which he shouldn't be even allowed to comment on. But you know, one of his things that he said about LeBron is he don't want to compete. Are you kidding me?
Okay.
I mean, seriously.
Okay, replay that fourth quarter of Game 7 and see who wants to compete.
Yes.
I mean, that's such a dumb thing to say.
Yeah.
He wants to compete with the Warriors, and the Warriors are making competing with them very difficult. You know, they beat those Warriors, and the Warriors added an MVP in his prime. Of course he wants to compete with that, and he knows the pieces. But he's not asking for a Kevin Durant. He's asking for a Mike Palmer. You know, he's asking for just a point guard help. He's asking to round out the roster properly. And, you know, how many football teams have we seen, you know, talk about the Colts, and it's so obvious where their shortcomings are. Where are the players putting the pressure on the front office? The players are the ones, you know, putting I mean, in football, almost obviously their lives on the line, but in these other sports, they're putting their reputation on the line. And if you can't, you know, build the team the way I can obviously see we need to build it, then I should say something. And frankly, you know, everybody who says LeBron's whiny, every single day you say that, go back and read Dan Gilbert's letter after LeBron left Miami and see what you call that, because that's beyond whiny and that's practically unforgivable. And this is LeBron making him pay for that. So, I mean, it's just Charles falling in line again with the kind of simple argument a lot of the times.
Israel, I want to ask you one more question for me before we let you go. Yesterday, I was tossing around the idea of asking you the question when we lined you up here to come on today, whether to ask you with the platform that you have, and I followed your career for years, and I know how well-rounded you are outside of just the realm of sports. And I said, you know, should I ask Israel Gutierrez if he ever feels tempted to comment on things that are happening so prevalent in the world? I mean, everywhere you look, TV, social media, the news, the papers, and And I said, well, I kind of tossed back and forth, but then I'm driving home from an event last night, and I heard a fascinating conversation that you and Sarah Spain had about how to address it as a sportscaster when there's so much bigger things happening right in front of your face, and where you find that balance. Can you just kind of recap that conversation briefly that you had yesterday? Because I thought it was fascinating.
Sure, and thank you very much for that. I guess it was one of those situations where in the past and in recent history, I've sort of made sure that, certain things, whether it's in the political realm, the social realm, or what have you, that maybe deserve some attention, even in the sports, in the sports market or in sports radio, sports media, because it's too important and because, sports is real life and a lot of the things cross over. It just so happens that this was really difficult because it felt like there are so many. See, as ESPN, and we're supposed to sort of limit the way we go politically, and we're not supposed to sort of lean one way or the other openly because we don't want to upset. And it's perfectly reasonable. We're a sports station, and it makes all the sense in the world, even though sometimes we do, like I said, cross over and discuss these things. But it was a tough place because I didn't want to just talk about it within the context of sports as we were supposed to. So then it becomes, well, do we speak about it at all? Because then it just doesn't have the same weight to it. And then, for years and years, as a sports writer, sports commentator, whatever, I always question sort of the fulfillment of this job because it is, Toy Department of Human Affairs type of stuff. But then, Sarah made a point to say that, this is kind of what, if you will, what those who are trying to sort of strangle our freedoms away from us want. They want us to go numb. They want us to sort of fall into the trap of believing that we can't do anything about it. And just by sort of going through these limitations and then just saying to yourself, okay, well, it's not worth talking about, then it's not fair to those who are fighting to change these things. So in essence, what we ended up doing is just playing a bunch of sound of other coaches and players, especially in the NBA, who kind of spoke to a lot of the things that we wanted to say anyway. So in that sense, it is talking about it. It's just kind of letting those who are free to do so without their job being questioned, do it for us. So I thought it was very interesting as well, and I'm glad you were listening.
Hey, one more for me is when I'll let you go. Trading deadline, February 23rd. The Carmelo Anthony headlines are just one after another here in New York. What's your thoughts? Do you think Carmelo Anthony will be traded somewhere by that Feb 23rd deadline?
I think Phil Jackson is not just on a mission, but he's probably been told he has to trade Carmelo Anthony and find a way to get him off the books and find a way to sort of build around another player, maybe obviously Porzingis being high on the list. I think he'll end up doing it. I think the idea that he'll either he'll waive a no trade to either L.A. or Boston, I think is more than I would even consider him. I thought he would just go to L.A. So if it is true that he's willing to go to Boston, yeah, it just goes to show you that he's loosening those ties to New York and is fine with going elsewhere. So, yeah, I think he'll end up being traded. Where, I'm not sure yet, but I think the best fit's out in L.A.
Israel Gutierrez, keep up the great work. Thanks for a few minutes here on Big Board Sports in Albany.
Appreciate it, guys.